All right, so we're actually picking this up like kind of a day later, but because Bobby's internet just kind of went down a little bit. So whenever I left off, I was talking about Bobby's history and how he got into DFS, and he had just mentioned that he right off the bat, at least pretty close to right off the bat, he was able to start winning right away. Now, yeah, I imagine that back in those days, things were easier, just like with the beginning of poker, the poker boom, things were easier online too. But my question is back then, what type of, quote unquote content was there? In other words, like for me, I always feel as though I have to learn from someone, and for me to figure it out on my own is really, really difficult. And so when I entered like either poker or DFS or anything, as I described in my bio, I mean, I had to like absorb content. I had to find people to teach me how to play and things like that. And from the implication of what you were saying, that there wasn't all that much to as far as content goes. So I guess I'll ask you it this way: what kind of content was there back then? If there wasn't a lot of content, how did you learn how to play? Third of all, was it just you just kind of figuring it out on your own? And just give me a little sense of how that all happened back then.
Yeah, it was definitely a different time. I mean, I think that there was content providers. I was new enough to where I didn't know how to even, like, I didn't know who to look for. You could look, could do searches and see this, but I wasn't going to pay, money to something I didn't understand, especially at the very beginning. So I immediately started trying to build my own, basically spreadsheets with like my own algorithms of how I thought things could play out. And I was trying to use a bunch of different like obvious things. Like for basketball, I was just going with pace of play versus things. There was other people like I knew who put more of an emphasis on like defense versus position because we didn't have that much stuff early on. So I would put lower, give that a lower rating than I would, but it would still be factored in. And I put about 20 categories together that would sort of give me what I thought was an early idea of a projection. Now, there was other people doing this stuff. What I did is I started doing well, and I was playing for larger amounts of money, which was pretty early still. Is I would tune in maybe 3 of the days I played a week. I would tune into a show for an hour or a half hour or something like that, and just try and get a feel for it.
What kind of show? Like what kind of shows were there?
There were shows. There were people talking.
Okay.
There were people still doing. Some of the old RG guys. Were still doing their thing. And I would basically, though, it just felt as a confirmation for me. And I felt like even when this is flashing forward, but not to change the question, but when I started working at RotoGrinders, one of the biggest problems I had, I went through a big losing streak for a while, partially because all these other ideas and all these other tools that are very helpful, but it just wasn't my process of doing things at the time. I was especially with baseball, like baseball was pretty easy. I still don't think the projections really mean all that much for baseball. And I know the sport well. I think that on a given day, you're trying to just play it like ownership game basically, or game theory. But it's you don't need to know it to try and figure it out. It's the one sport where you could literally randomly put in a lineup and not even worry about salary cap and potentially win a tournament. It's the weirdest sport in that sense. But what I was doing was basically just trying to highlight the trends that I was noticing, and I was doing it because I was going through a period where I was sort of trying to figure out what I next wanted to do with my life, if that wanted to be it. And I wanted to figure out exactly how to become the best at it. So eventually I did start looking into more content things, but there wasn't a lot, like there were some projection systems that didn't make a lot of sense to me, to be honest with you. And they were just wildly different from each other, more so than now where everything's pretty much similar. But there was things out there. It just was a lot of my ability to get good at it probably had something to do with feel, something to do with paying a lot of attention to the games, trying to figure out how games were going to play, because I thought I was watching more NBA probably than anyone. Same thing probably with baseball. Maybe not watching as much baseball, but paying attention to it. And then football it was a little bit more of a learning curve, but there was always a ton of information out there for football. There was never a shortage of it. There's much more and much better now, but there was always fantasy football. So the information was there, and there was regular fantasy sports. You could look at things like Roto World, but they weren't really geared towards that daily fantasy at all at the time. They were geared towards more who we expect to have a good week this week, who you want to play on your team or whatever. But it wasn't like it was nowhere near where it is now. So a lot of it had to do with feel, trying to find my own way. I like the projection system I built. I was actually going to try and release it and like actually make it a big thing with my old site, but it was simplistic. And I then converted it to when I started paying attention to projection systems, where until I think 2 years ago, I was basically converting everyone else's top things and then just meshing them together and then adding in the extra categories, giving a certain percentage ranking to things that I value more than other people. Like, I mean, pace of play everyone values, but I think that I'm a little bit more obsessive over it. I'm not worried nearly as much about defense versus position. So where I can try and take little things where I thought things were getting overdone, sort of the Utah Jazz would be a great example. Statistically, they'll still show up as a strong defensive team, even though they don't play good defense. Or they give up a lot of points, let's put it that way. The Milwaukee Bucks, people get afraid of playing people against the best defensive team in the NBA. But the truth is, if the game stays close, they're going to play so fast, you're going to be forced to score a bunch of fantasy points. Things like that I just picked up on sooner. And I think it was like poker. It was like poker in the early days, you know what I mean? Like, you could just be better, and you go, am I right? Am I really just making better decisions than these guys? Why is no one playing this guy? Why is no one doing this? And sometimes you just have to say, maybe they were wrong. Maybe they don't understand quite fully enough. And I think the game was also, people were sort of dabbling. So you could have one of these nights where you have a guy put up a 0 in basketball and you could still cash occasionally. It was rare, but you could do it. Now it's almost impossible unless a bunch of guys get hurt or something. Like, you know what I mean?
Two quick follow-up questions. Do you have any history with doing season-long stuff also, or did you just go right into DFS?
You're going to think this is braggy. So I used to do the March Madness thing all the time, and it was my favorite time of year when I was a kid because they would let us play in these little pools. And I had a phenomenal record to the point where I was running it for a while, and they made me stop running it because I was winning too much, and I still was winning. So I got into that, and then I got into I love basketball so much, obviously, but it's so far and away my favorite sport. So we'd have groups of friends who would get to play these season-long things, but we really only did it a few years. I won every one of the years, and I won in a landslide every one of the years. It was really easy to try to figure out things like that other people weren't looking at. Everybody was just picking people who scored the most or had the most rebounds. I'm like, wait a minute, all these sites, like you're underrating the categories for steals and blocks and whatever. And of course now steals and blocks are the equivalent of that. Back in the day, you were just trying to win categories, but I did have a little bit of experience, but very, very little. Of course, I know sports, so my friends would come to me since I was 9 years old, people would come to me asking, hey, do I play this guy or this guy? I mean, maybe not 9 years old, but as long as there's been fantasy sports, I've been asked that question. So I just think it was a natural fit. I think I love sports, and it was not enough back then, but it was up there it was as important as anybody trying to crunch numbers at the time because no one quite figured it out yet.
Yeah, when most people, think of fantasy sports, it's funny that you mentioned basketball because, you ask like people of my age group, whatever, what they think, they think of fantasy sports. It's usually people's first experiences were either back in baseball where they had what used to be called rotisserie baseball, like before it was even called fantasy baseball, where they would do, fantasy baseball teams or rotisserie baseball teams during like the whole season. Yeah. Or the other way that most people my age kind of think about or know from fantasy sports are fantasy football leagues, right? Where they just like season-long stuff. But you immediately, when I mentioned, fantasy sports and where your history, you immediately went to basketball with and you kind of stepped on my next question, which you answered with incredible certainty and force without even hearing it. When I asked you what's your favorite sport to dabble with, to play as far as fantasy sports. Now again, it's interesting because when I was going to ask is I was going to qualify it by saying forget how much you win, forget where you're most successful at. You know what I mean? Like which do you enjoy the most? And that there is a difference probably, or maybe I don't know. But it's interesting that basketball. Now, do you think that you like basketball? DFS the most because you like basketball, the sport, the most? I guess that makes most sense, right?
I think so, but I actually think that first of all, I think it's always been the hardest, and I think it's still by far the hardest. It's just, baseball is like a relaxing thing to me because you don't need to really pay that much attention. You don't need to sweat every single thing. Maybe at the very end if you're doing well, whatever. You also don't need to be anywhere unless all you have to be there for is in case anybody gets late scratched, you need a notification. That's all you need. It's not like basketball where somebody does that, somebody's late scratch, and all of a sudden the entire slate is completely on its head, which happens basically daily in basketball, especially after the first couple months of the season. So basketball, I would say, I don't know that I would say it's my favorite because it's high stress for me. The best I feel now is on Sundays. It's the most I look forward to. With football, it's really enjoyable. But on just a regular basis, I know if they were playing every day like baseball and basketball do, I would definitely be more on the basketball side than anything else. So but it is harder. I mean, we go through this all the time. It's much harder. Like that's partly what I like about it, though. Too.
Yep.
It's like constantly trying to figure out the same puzzle that you already figured out. And if you don't go through that process of trying to figure out the initial puzzle, you're not going to be as prepared for that, when things happen, that secondary puzzle.
So it's interesting, one thing that's going on Twitter is, a lot of people, because it's this time that people are just kind of thinking about stuff and, just, embracing their communities and things like that. A lot of people are kind of reflecting on like their past a little bit. Like people are sharing gambling stories, people are sharing different experiences or whatever it is. And so you were, you were telling me that since you're 9 years old, you've been really into sports, and and one thing about all of us, not all of us, but people like us, there's no difference as far as generations go. Like I think back to when I have distinct memories of not only rooting for the Knicks in literally 1973. Okay, when I was 6 years old, when they were in the championship, but actually keeping score on a piece of paper as I was listening to the whatever. To that end, I just, for those of you who see me shuffle for something while you were talking, I actually found, because only she sent it to me, my stepmom actually sent me like 3 years ago, like old letters that I wrote her from camp when I was 9, okay, literally 9. And one of them, I'm going to read a little bit. I'm doing excellent in baseball and my tennis game is fine, but my soccer playing is fantastic. I have enclosed all of my sports records, standings, and individual statistics to date. I'm 9, okay? And I actually, like if you look, you can't read this, but this is actually a calculation of my ERA when I was playing as a 9-year-old in sleepaway camp. And my batting average, it looks like it looks like a 272 or something like that. But I am showing 1,000 fielding percentage here.
Oh, nice.
7 walks. So it looked like I had a good patience at the plate, you know what I mean, in 42 at-bats. I don't know. So, but we're all kind of the same in that way. We're always
pretty
kind
funny
of,
because my family plays a weekly baseball game. We talk about how I have a huge family, extended family. And then also on that, of course, you're going to have a bunch of other friends. Some of them excellent baseball players. It's a wide range, but since I think it was 1977 or 8, they've been playing every Sunday as much as possible. They travel a lot, so every Sunday you're home basically. You can get the guys together. But we have a pretty big group of people, so we've been playing these games. But one of the things I would do was we'd actually have people keep score with an actual scoring card. So I would go through the scoring card and figure out all everybody's statistics. And then I started playing in that game when I was about 12 or 13 because we did talk a little bit, but not going to high school was my biggest regret about not going to public school was sports. I played a lot of basketball and baseball anyway. And I was living in Italy for 3 years and playing with semi-pro, all the guys who played in like the Italian pro league. Now I wasn't necessarily as good as a lot of them, but I was better than a good number of them when I was young. And it was sort of my high school sports days. You know what I mean? I just never really got a chance to actually do it in school. And then when I went to City College, I was the coach. There was a highlight, whatever. There was the top level basketball class or whatever, which wasn't mean much, but I just thought, okay, it'd be fun to be out there playing. So I got out there and I would, we played with the team would come out and play with us at the City College. It was a pretty good team. The coach said that I passed out on the court once when we were doing scrimmages with the team. And he told me afterwards, he picked me up. He's like, I want, next year, if you're back, I've got a place for you on our team no matter what. And I was like, okay, that'll be fun. But I, of course, me and my girlfriend, I got a job offer that was really good. And we were, going to have a baby. And we wanted to have a baby at some point. So I sort of didn't go to school again, but that would have been my linking the actual playing part. But mostly it's just been always a love of sports. And part of it also I didn't mention this part before, but my godfather who passed away last year, which was really a tough one. He's a sweetheart of a guy, and he taught me everything. He taught me everything about sports, and he used to do a game with us where he would, ask us questions for $1 or ask us questions for whatever. Yep. And the harder the questions, the more so it was just like, I know more about the history of baseball, like by the time I was 10 than anybody but him. And he used to play in these high end, he was a lawyer. He was actually a lawyer for Steve Wynn and he became a very big lawyer from a guy who, when I first knew him, he was, just a guy in law school when I was a kid. But he ended up, he ended up starting this, like he was in this high end, this is before the DFS stuff, but it was this high end projection simulation fantasy league using all the players and years from all time. and you would do drafts, and then you would replay and play whichever guy against which guy each day and all that stuff. And he was always like the best at it. So that was like looking into that part as part of sports. He would always show me that stuff from when I was little. That he would play in they call it the judges game or whatever.
Yeah.
And it was just cool. It was just interesting. That's really what got me into it.
I do feel as though you have to, I mean, it's nice to like what you do in any field that you're in, right?
Sure.
And where I do certainly admire, and I'm sure that there are people like this that do DFS without really liking sports. There are people that do that. I mean, there are people just look at these guys as data points and whatever it is, and it's just a way to make money, and that's fine. I totally chilled with that. That's actually kind of the way I look at the stock market. I don't even look at them as companies sometimes.
Right.
Look at them as just like betting interest on the board, you know. But I do feel like people like us that are really into sports, that have always been into sports, and also the statistical part of it, you know, that kind of just never goes away, you know. Right. And like I'll give you even one story like from different parts of our lives. So like when I was even in college, you know, where, you know, I was drinking with my friends and all this stuff. There was one night, I'll never forget this, that me and my friend, I went to college in Boston, and it was like 11 o'clock at night. And we're like, what do you want to do? And we already drank, whatever, we didn't want to do anything else. So we went, there was an all-night 24-hour bowling alley in Dorchester, Massachusetts. So we went and we played from, just the two of us, we bowled from 11 p.m. to literally 7 in the morning. Jeez. Okay? Just nonstop. And then so we figured we'd come back, and, you know, at 7:30 we got back to school. He obviously went into his room and crashed, but I stayed up an extra 2 hours calculating statistics from the games. so that's kind of, and obviously posted him on his door. You know what I mean? Like when I was done. So yeah, so that was all really enlightening, and it certainly, you know, goes a long way to explain why you're so successful at this, and probably why you'd be successful doing whatever you did. But certainly your natural love of sports and your background with your family and things like that, it all kind of combines to you know, to why you're one of the best at this particular passion. So
no, I appreciate that, man. It's a great way. Like the thing is with DFS is great, but I also think with poker, even like the one thing I missed and I know you don't feel the same way, but I really enjoyed playing the last couple of days. Even though it hasn't entirely gone my way, although I made a couple really deep runs, and there's pretty good tournaments going on. But that's my way. That was like, I knew I couldn't compete on a physical, especially in my 20s. It was too late for anything. So I wanted to be able to compete at the highest level of something. And I said, okay, I'm going to make sure I do everything I can to get as good at this as I possibly can, because I want to be able to be elite at something I can compete at. And I really thought there was a chance that was the best avenue I would ever have. And, you know, it turned out to work out pretty good.
Yep. Yeah. So last night I played in that same home game and I lost. So I hate poker again. So, okay. All right. So we'll call this again for those of you that are hopefully people that you are watching this, maybe you watch it once today, and hopefully these will be viewed by people that maybe X weeks or months down the road, you'll be on one of our sites, that this will be part of the biography of us. And when you're watching this, there'll hopefully be plenty of DFS to be played. And the time that we're recording this is going to look like a kind of an ugly memory, or at least an ugly reminder of a really ridiculous time. But as long as you have the time to record this stuff, I'm really glad we did it. And that's it.
Me too. Thanks a lot, man. That was fun. And we'll be back with another one shortly.
Okay.
All right.